Welcome, everyone, to the podcast Woman Fully Alive. I'm your host, Madeline Eames, and I'm so glad that you're here with me today because I'm really excited to talk with my guest today, Dr. Eleanor Stein. And as an introduction to all of you, because I have known Ellie for a little while now through my work at the Chronic Pain Clinic, and she's come on as a guest with really science-backed, actionable tips for people to start moving their bodies out of illness and into health. So, Dr. Stein is a retired psychiatrist who is now traveling in her van, all hooked up with Wi Fi, which I absolutely love, who commits her time to helping people really through science backed information on chronic pain and illness. So, welcome, Ellie, to today's show.
Thanks so much, Madeline. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, yeah. So, just to bring our listeners up to date, you are right now in a campground in your
Yeah,
van, and you've been on the road since you retired as a psychiatrist from Calgary, Alberta.
yes, a little bit. I retired in November 2020, December 2022, so basically the end of the year. I stayed home, believe it or not, in the winter for several months to kind of get my online business rolling and do a whole bunch of prep for that. And then I was away for 5 months last year, and this year I've been away so far for 7 months.
Oh my goodness. Yes. It just sounds like the life of working remotely and using your skills to help people. And I feel like when you're enjoying your life and doing what you really want to do, it only helps the people that you're speaking to.
I hope so, because everything I'm saying are things that I personally do every day. So,
Mm.
I don't know exactly yet where the conversation will go. But I walk the walk. The things that I've learned over my 35-year illness experience, because I became ill in 1989 with myalgic encephalomyelitis, fibromyalgia, chemical sensitivities, POTS, MCAS, etc. Of course, it took many years to get all those labels.
Yeah.
Um, so I've had a pretty long journey and I've gone through a lot of transitions and different phases of what I thought would be most helpful. And I think what we're going to talk about today is kind of where I'm at now from all of that learning.
Absolutely. Yes. And 1989 was a generation ago when it comes to information and resources for these types of chronic illnesses, or chronic conditions and pain. So, today we're going to talk about 5 tips to break free from chronic disease. So, why don't we just dive right in? What
Okay.
you've learned, what would be most important for people to know through these 5 tips that you've learned through your own experience and a ton of research, I will add, because you have researched things that are only really, this is why I like talking with you, that are really grounded in the science. So, yeah, why don't you start us off with some of the tips, or the first tip you'd see as being essential for people?
It's funny, Madeline, so I've written down 5 areas that we could discuss. And I was agonizing before we started, okay, which one should I say first? Because of
Mm,
course, people are going to read a lot into the one I say first must be the one that I think is the most important. So if I use a mind tip first, people are going to say, oh, she thinks it's all in the mind, and they might disregard everything else I have to say. At the same time, if I say a body tip first, people who have a lot of mental health symptoms and challenges are going to be like, oh, this isn't for me. So I think where I'd like to start is I'm going to tell you the 5 areas that I think are probably the most important for people to at least consider, and then say that for any given person at any different time, the relative importance of these 5 could differ substantively. And I can give examples from my own experience. So I've got mindset first. And I can
okay.
talk a lot about some of the science of mindset, which is mind blowing. I've got ancestral strategies, and that's something I'm really heavily learning about and super excited about.
Me
I've got
too. Yeah.
sleep. Sleep and circadian rhythm is, of course, massive. Diet, again, we could do a year worth of podcasts
Yes.
just on that topic alone, and then pacing or activity management. So I would
Okay.
say for any given person, the relative importance or where they could think about starting amongst those five is going to be very individual. So, for example, if you notice in yourself that you've got a lot of negative tapes playing, things like, this isn't going to work for me. I've listened to numerous experts. I try stuff, it doesn't work. I'm too
Hmm.
sick. I'm too poor. I'm too whatever. You can fill in the dots. Then you might want to start with mindset because I believe, and I think the research bears this out, that unless your thoughts are in sync with your goals, they're going to hold you back.
Right.
And I
I
know
can
that
see
sounds a
so
bit
much.
woo-woo, but the science is there to support it.
The science is there, and also I'm just thinking as you say that. Thanks for that. That kind of a caveat to what you're talking
Mhm.
about, because absolutely, I can see that. And like whatever your doorway is in, like say it's mindset, then it might take you to, oh, I didn't get a good night's sleep. Oh, I
Right.
haven't eaten yet today. Or I can see how they can all kind of intertwined with each other. So
Yeah,
keep that in
absolutely.
mind to our listeners. Yeah.
So I don't know, where would you like me to start in all that? What jumped out at you?
Yeah, what jumped out for me? So let me just think. Well, I'm sleeping well. Like I'm just thinking about, I why don't we start with mindset since we've
Okay,
we've opened it up? Yeah.
sure.
Hmm.
So here's just a couple of studies. One of my favorite researchers is Dr. Alia Crum, C-R-U-M. She's a professor of psychology at Stanford, so very credentialed. She did I think it might have been her postdoc at Harvard with another very famous researcher in the field. The two studies that I kind of remember the best and think are so important, one is called the Housekeepers Study. So this evaluated a bunch of Latina housekeepers that worked at hotels and did the daily cleaning of the rooms. They had the belief or mindset that because they were so tired when they got home from work, they weren't doing enough exercise and they were therefore out of shape and probably suffering from poor health. They did some kind of survey which ascertained this. The intervention was so simple and elegant. So the researchers took us, of course, like always, split them into two groups, right? One that had the intervention and one that nothing changed. So they're the placebo group. The one group, they said to them, actually, we've observed you doing your job and the number of times you bend and lift and carry and push and pull and tuck and all of that. And actually, you meet the Surgeon General's recommendation for daily exercise. That was their total intervention. They measured a bunch of stuff like heart rate, blood pressure, maybe even cholesterol before the intervention in everybody. The other half of the people weren't told anything. They just
Okay.
kind of were followed for a month. And at the end of the month, they repeated the tests. The people who had been told that actually, unbeknownst to them, they were doing, a good amount of exercise, their biological markers improved. Even though they didn't actually change their behavior, they weren't told to do anything different. None of them joined gyms. They did a follow-up survey to say, did your behavior change in a whole bunch of different ways? It didn't change. The
Hmm.
only thing that changed was their belief about whether they were doing a healthy amount of exercise or not, and their health improved.
That
Isn't
is
that amazing?
that is
And these are hard
incredible.
measures, right? Like blood pressure, heart rate,
Right.
cholesterol, and I think
Right.
there were a few more. So
But
that's one,
just to show the
yeah,
power of belief
yeah,
over our biology, about how we're thinking about things actually affects us physically in measured ways.
And
Yeah.
I think for your listeners, I teach something called neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is a naturally occurring process in all of our brains all the time. The brain is constantly remodeling
Mm,
to allow us to learn new things, right? And hopefully to unlearn things that aren't serving us well.
yeah.
And I think probably that's in part how mindset works, is that if you change your mindset, even if you don't change your behavior, you're actually firing and wiring new neural circuits that weren't that active before. So
Right.
these housekeepers, maybe, because this wasn't measured in the study, so this is just my idea of what might have happened. They're all of a sudden thinking differently. So now every day that they're making the bed, instead of thinking to themselves, I'm so tired when I get home, I'm just going to crash and go to McDonald's. They
Yeah.
might be
Yeah.
thinking, oh, actually, this is just the same as lifting weights. I'm doing it every day. I'm getting
Just
stronger.
that
Yeah,
reframe.
yeah,
Yeah.
reframe. That's exactly
And then
it.
they've got more energy. I really did something for myself today. Now, I know that you are not the type of person that says just think positive and,
Right,
everything will be okay. And that's not actually what you're saying. You're saying like
right.
a reframe on what is already happening. Um, or you will become what you believe because it's like your body doesn't have a chance to do anything different.
Yeah, so every time we have a thought, feeling, or we do an action, we fire certain patterns of neurons, right? It's the individual pattern totally depends on exactly what we do and how we do it and when we do it and how cold we are when we do it and all of these like untold number of factors. And the more we fire a certain pattern over and over, it begins to hardwire and create new pathways. And now those pathways become our new default. So there's other studies, not quite in the mindset literature. I call it how to use your imagination. So the research has shown that the number of neurons, so we can measure these changes to the brain, right? So you practice something, say you practice playing the piano every day for 2 hours for 5 days,
Mhm.
and you have a functional MRI at, Monday morning and Friday afternoon after you've done this 10 hours of practice. You can see physical changes on the functional MRI. Like it's real and measurable because the structure of the brain has changed. And the circuits that enabled you to play the piano because you've practiced and probably you've gotten a little bit better and a little bit smoother,
Mm-hmm.
that's because your brain has changed. So this is the mind body interface. You have thoughts
Yeah.
and they change the structure and function of the brain.
Right.
So that's not that striking. We've known that for 40 years, that if you ask people to do something different, their brain rewires. Hundreds, if not thousands, of experiments showing that. But the really
Right.
cool part is that if you take another group of people and you say to them, you demonstrate to them the little simple piano chord, and you say, I don't want you to move your fingers at all. I
Mm-hmm.
want you to sit and imagine that you're playing the piano for two
Mm-hmm.
hours a day. Now, how they get them to imagine without drifting off, I'm not sure. That part puzzles me. But anyway, they imagine they're playing the piano, but they don't actually move their fingers at all.
Yeah.
And when they do the functional MRI at the end of the week, they've got about 80% of the changes of the people that actually did the piano practice.
That is incredible. And it just validates why we do visualization and using
Exactly.
your imagination. It's not wishful thinking because, tell me if I'm right, your brain can't tell the difference between a little bit of difference because you're not
Yeah.
moving physically, but between doing it and imagining it.
That's the conclusion that most people have drawn from that research. I've read also studies where they did it with basketball. So they got, I think this was high school kids to do free throws. Trouble saying that, free throws,
Okay.
like the 3 pointers, right? So they got think it was at lunch hour for an hour a day for a certain number of days. Some of the kids actually practiced it over and over, and the other kids imagined themselves throwing the basketball. And
Mm-hmm.
again, the changes on the brain imaging were about 80% as much.
That is incredible for many reasons, but also it's a relatively short period of time
Exactly.
to actually change the gray matter, I think is what you're saying, like
Yeah,
in your brain. So for those people that are listening, this has a lot of this can have a lot of impact in how you live in terms of movement, getting moving again, perhaps if you have chronic pain, like just to start imagining.
exactly. So what I tell people, in my courses is if you can't do anything, say you're bedbound, say you're really
Mm-hmm.
severely ill, and even just sitting up is already too much, just imagine sitting up.
Yeah.
Do that for a couple weeks, 2, 3 weeks, and just see what happens. You might find that you're just a tiny bit more able to do it because you've primed the brain. You've got the neurons starting to make the connections that maybe have been lost during the time that you've been so severely ill. So I think this isn't one of the 5 things. We got already off topic,
I
which is
know.
totally fine. But it's a really great strategy that I think gives hope to people that are very severely ill.
Absolutely. That you can start from wherever you are. And I know that we could spend a whole hour just talking about that because I think we have. But I think this leads into I'm thinking
Mhm.
about the patterns and the fears that we're brought up with or we're even brought into the world with, and it kind of leads me into asking you about the tip of around ancestral healing.
Love that one. So since I've been traveling in my van, as you can imagine, I have time while I'm driving. I've put 40,000 kilometers on my van last year
Ooh.
and this year, so that's a lot of driving. And I listen to podcasts a
Mm-hmm.
lot. And then if I hear one I like, I look up the guest and read their book and try to learn more about what they're talking about. And just in the last, I'm going to say since about June or July of this summer, so this is really new for me, I've started listening to podcasts on quantum biology. And I didn't even know what that meant, but just the title is very intriguing. And basically, what it refers to, if we just take the sun as an example, we receive light from the sun in little packets or quanta. It looks like it's just a steady stream of white light, but actually, it's comprised of quanta that have a certain number of so quanta or photons of all the different wavelengths of light, right? All the different colors. And you know
Okay.
that because if it's refracted through a cloud, you can see a rainbow. So even though it
Right.
looks white, it's actually made up of all of the colors. And it's also made up of wavelengths we can't see. So it's
Okay.
included, there's visible light and invisible light. The invisible is ultraviolet.
Mm.
So the rays that are maybe more damaging, they're higher energy little packets. And then at the other end, more longer and less energetic wavelengths are infrared. We can't see
Right.
either of those. So what I've learned is we evolved as mammals, as animals, as humans over literally millions, hundreds of millions of years, if you take all of our ancestors that we evolved from,
Mm-hmm.
to survive because of the energy coming from the sun. So just like it's really obvious to us that plants, you cannot grow a plant in the dark, right? If you live in an
Right.
apartment and you buy a nice new plant and you put it in your hall closet and you close the door,
Right.
within a few days, that plant will start drooping and basically die. Even
Right.
if you
It's
water
so
it and
simple.
even if you
Yeah.
give it plant food,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I kind of went, duh, right? Like we all instinctively know that, but we somehow think we're different.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the other animals live outside and get the right amount of sunlight for their species. Of course, some are nocturnal and some live underground,
Yeah.
etc. We've all adapted in different ways. But humans adapted in equatorial countries to be outside in full sun the whole day,
Right.
12 hours of the day, and to come in maybe and live in a cave or some kind of enclosure at night. And we think that we don't have to follow those rules, that the rules don't apply to us because we're these highly evolved beings, and that
Yeah.
we can live in artificial environments like indoors without real light, for example. So I've just been overdosing, I would say, on learning how
Yeah.
harmful it is to live an indoor lifestyle. And I'm the first offender. Like, I went to
Yeah.
medical school. I was
They
inside.
didn't teach you this in medical
Oh
school.
my goodness. No, they didn't. And I was a figure skater growing up. So even all summer, I spent inside in fluorescently lit, dark,
Yeah.
relatively dark arenas. I remember I would come out after a day of skating and just be blinded by the sun, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And oh,
But if you even think about office workers and how we've
oh
developed
yeah.
as a species,
Hmm.
with our industry,
Yep.
and now, of course, in front of screens, up too
Hmm.
late with artificial light, it's everything's clicking, telling me like it's no wonder we're vitamin D deficient. We've got
Yeah.
depression and a lot of illness.
And the way it really directly impacts us, just as plants use sunlight to create energy
Hmm.
that helps them grow, like they use their energy to grow bigger, we use sunlight for energy as well. The sunlight directly acts on our mitochondria. The mitochondria are the little organelles in every cell that produce cellular energy. So anybody with a chronic illness who has low energy as part of their symptom cluster,
Yeah.
fatigue, post-exertional malaise, probably could benefit from spending more time outside. And as a result of learning this, for my whole 35-year medical career, I became increasingly focused on some of the minutia of myalgic encephalomyelitis and chronic pain,
Hmm.
and what's the biochemistry and what's the neuroscience and all these details.
Yeah.
But as I'm kind of backing up now to the what some people call the 30,000-foot view, because I'm like, you know
Hmm.
what? All chronic disease probably has certain modern lifestyle factors in common, and that one of the most obvious and the easiest to correct is lack of sunlight. We literally can't power our cells and get enough energy without the sun.
Doesn't it make you want to shout that from the rooftops
That's
to
why I'm
all the
doing this
people and
podcast, Madeline.
all the people
I've
that
I've
work in
written a
chronic
couple
pain?
blogs on it, and yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm thinking, before we move on to the next
Hmm.
one, I'm thinking of teenagers that are right in their growing period that spend and that spend half their day having to sleep, and then the other half on a like I'm
Advice.
curious. I don't want to think about the repercussions of that down. Luckily, our bodies can adapt, right? When with neuroplasticity, when we start feeding it what it needs.
Yeah, I think as long as I was like, oh, I don't know, but you added the magic words, which is when we give it what it needs.
Ah,
But
yeah,
if we stay in the dark,
yeah.
and if we stay disconnected from the earth by wearing rubber-soled shoes all the time, just to
Okay.
add even more complexity,
Okay. Yeah.
and we eat, um, I won't even call it food, we'll call it ultra processed food. We eat stuff that really doesn't have nutrition. So all of this is a massive departure from what our ancestors did, right? They ate real food.
Yeah.
They walked with bare feet on the ground, or if they had shoes or moccasins, they were leather. So they were still electrically connected to the earth, and they were outside for the entire, like, sun
Right.
up to sundown.
Oh my goodness. Those odd days where I am outside working, moving, I feel so much different at the end of the day. So it kind of leads me to into what you
Mhm.
just talked about, what we're eating
Yeah,
and the nutrition tip. So why don't we move on to that one?
sure. This one, probably your listeners are going to say, this is no big surprise. They know it, right?
Mm,
We know that junk food and processed food isn't giving us the nutrition we need. And yet we probably mostly still do it. So when my
Yeah.
lifestyle is I cook real food with single ingredients 2 or 3 times every single day. Either I make a salad, some raw food, or I cook food from single ingredients. And it's time consuming,
Mm.
right? So a lot of people might say, I have 4 children, I have a job, like there's just no way I can possibly do that. So I really get that it's harder for some people, or they say, I can't afford real
Yeah.
ingredients, especially organic ingredients, because the research is becoming more clear that, again, it probably doesn't matter what you eat. Like if you choose to be more eating vegetables, if you choose to be more eating meat, if you have high fat, low fat, this is just my personal opinion, because there's strong opinions out there in the diet
Yes. And
field
so
on
many.
all
Yeah.
of these, right? And at some point, I'm just like, you know what? I think if we use our common sense and eat real food, things that are single ingredients, like I put a carrot and an onion and some meat and some
Yeah.
broccoli and maybe some herbs and spices because they're really rich in phytonutrients. And then for dessert, maybe I have some fruit.
Yeah.
That
Yeah. It's
is a
okay.
healthy meal. Now, some people have sensitivities, some people, we all have different genetics. So
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a great podcast called What is the Best Diet for Humans
Okay.
by Aaron Segal. He's a Israeli, really prolific and smart Israeli researcher. And to cut to the chase, he says there is no best diet for humans. We're all different. And in his TED Talk, he talks about using something like microbiome testing or a continuous tissue glucose monitor to figure out what's right for you. So I think
Yes. I remember hearing that.
if anyone says you should all eat like this, say raw plant-based diet, or you should all eat keto, or you should all eat paleo, it's probably just not true because if you look at different cultures around the world, they eat very, very different diets.
Right.
So I would say, number one, eat real single ingredient food so you know exactly what's going into your body. Eat
Yeah.
organic if at all possible, because it does make a difference. Pesticides and herbicides are bad for our health. Eat as much diversity as possible. So
Mm-hmm.
in the
I've
plant
heard
world,
that.
that means, 30 different species of plants per week.
And you could tell by the colors,
Yeah,
different colors
yeah,
on your plate. I remember my mom telling me that. Yeah.
yeah. Your mom was onto something. And so real food, organic food. And then I would say there's one negative, which is just don't eat anything that comes in a package
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's too
because
far
it's going to have
removed.
sugar. It's going to have, I eat a lot of salt, so I'm not against salt, but it's going to have a high amount of salt. It's going to have a lot of chemicals. It's
Yeah.
probably going to have refined seed oils. So it's going to be the majority. Like I remember on this trip, because I'm not perfect, one day I was just craving something and I think it was macaroons. And I thought, well, they're made of coconut. What could be so bad about macaroons? So I wolfed them all down. Feel not that great. I look at the package, there's not a single word that I understand on that package.
Right. That's a sign.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. When it's too far removed from its natural, it's too far removed from the ground. Um,
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
mhm, mhm. So it's no small move to start giving up processed food a little by little, and start getting
Little by
back
little.
to what you can make, maybe simple meals, and seeing at, if your life is very, very busy, just starting to carve out those times where you can maybe batch cook on a
Mhm.
Sunday, or when you have some time to do that, because that also speaks to our culture, doesn't it? And this um, fast-paced eating, fast-paced everything, just kind of slow it down a bit, which I'm sure is good for the
Slow
nervous
food. Yeah.
system. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah, like to whew. slow it down. So let me think. What do you think would come next in the way of of tips?
Well, we haven't talked much about sleeper pacing, so
Yeah,
I
let's go
think
pacing. Or
let's go
no,
pacing.
yeah, like
So
yeah, because we're kind of slowing things down and
right, right.
yeah.
Good point. Because when I do these, I'd be like, oh, and there's this, and there's this, and I want to share everything with the listeners, right? Pacing, probably not everyone needs to pace. It really depends. So pacing would be worth learning about if you have fatigue or something called post-exertional malaise.
Okay.
Now, almost everybody with any chronic condition has fatigue, whether you have heart disease, lung disease, arthritis, long COVID, autoimmune disease, kidney disease, right? Blood disease, doesn't matter. Virtually every chronic disease is associated with fatigue.
Yeah.
And that means becoming aware, we call it the energy envelope. So every day you wake up and you do a little moment of self-assessment. It might take literally 10 seconds. You say, okay, on a scale from 0 to 10 or 0 to 100, whichever is more meaningful to you, how much energy do I have to spend today? So pretend it's kind of like having money in the bank. How many energy dollars do I have to spend? And 10 or 100 would be, I can do whatever I want. I feel fantastic. So most people with chronic disease are probably not going to be rating, I'll just use the 0 to 100, not going to be probably above 70.
Hmm.
70 is kind of the cutoff in the chronic fatigue syndrome or ME field. We kind of use 70 as the cutoff. So if you're above 70, we say, you know what, probably you don't have ME. Maybe you've got some other cause of your fatigue. If your energy is below 70, now we're getting into the moderate and severe range. And so
Okay.
you kind of assess ahead of time, how much energy do I have? So say you say, based, and it takes a while to kind of learn this about yourself. I have 50 energy dollars in the bank today. And then you look at the list of things you want to accomplish. Can you accomplish them with your $50?
Mm.
Or do you have $80 worth of commitments and activities and tasks? And pacing, my definition of pacing means adapt your activities to your energy, because your energy is not going to change, right? It's only going to
Yeah.
go down as the day progresses, as you build
Right.
up some of those spoons or energy dollars. The only thing you have control over is how much you do.
Right.
Whatever you might have control over your energy in the future if you do some of the tips that I'm talking about, but for today, you can't hack energy. If your cells don't have enough ATP, adenosine triphosphate cellular energy, that's it. That's what you've got for the day. Just like today, I have this much money in the bank. I can try to earn some more in the future, but for today, that's what I have. And my
Yeah.
recommendation is to live within your budget.
I love this for a number of reasons, but just this idea too that you're bringing in of tuning in to your body, like tuning into your own capacity in the morning. Because my experience of myself and of working with people is that we look at, I should do all these things, and we're operating
Right.
in our mind, going like, oh, I've got to get all this stuff done, and completely ignoring what our body is actually telling us. And
Yeah.
and so even just that tuning in to yourself, checking in, and then honoring that. Sometimes, maybe you go over and then or maybe under, but actually just honoring yourself in that moment to me seems pretty significant.
I love how you put that, because in listening to you, what came into my mind is if I prioritize the tasks, I'm actually valuing usually external things like I have to go to work, I have to help my kids, I have to do this or that volunteer activity, help my partner. You're valuing that more than yourself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
kind of like, they always tell you in the airplane, put your own oxygen mask on first. That's kind of what pacing is. If you don't pace, you're going to run into debt, and your energy in the bank is going to get depleted to the
Mhm.
point where you are going to get a chronic illness if you don't already have one, and you're not going to be able to recover quickly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what pacing helps people avoid, are those prolonged crashes where all personal choice is taken away because your body, like, there's nothing you can do at that point except rest and try
Yeah.
to rebuild your energy.
So important. And I think maybe for another conversation, it brings up a lot, I think, for people around, who am I if I can't do this list anymore? What if I can't help all these people out there? So maybe there's big people pleasing tendencies, and that might start coming up. To be healed, to
Yeah.
be healed. I want to add to that. And I know for myself, being a trauma therapist for so many years, I had to find out the hard way through burning out that there is no option at that
Right.
point when you really hit the wall, that you actually have to honor yourself, or you're not going to be helping anyone, let alone yourself.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, really, a lot of these principles that we're talking about apply to relatively healthy people as well, right? If you're relatively
mm-hmm,
healthy, but you continually overspend your energy budget, you
mm-hmm.
might not stay healthy.
Yeah, yeah. That's a great just reminder to tune in. Think about your capacity. How many bucks do you have in the bank today? And not judging
Mhm.
yourself for it. This is what's
Right.
in the bank. Yeah,
It is what it is. You've
it
done your
is what it
best,
is.
and this is the status of your situation today. Then, as you learn, like I've been just on this steep, steep learning curve for the past 35 years. And as I learn stuff, I'm like, oh, here's an idea. If I implement this on a daily basis, maybe I can build my energy for the future.
Right. It's like putting money in the bank.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. And everything that you're telling us is not it's free. Nobody has to pay for sunlight.
Yeah.
And done in very manageable bits, can be implemented today. Like those
Yeah.
very
Like
small things.
some people who are severely ill have emailed me and said, I can't even go outside. Or I live in Calgary, where I'm from, and it's, I think today, and in fact, my computer's telling me right now in Calgary, it's minus 13. I
Is
don't
it?
want to go outside.
No, no. But it's
Yeah,
sunny there, isn't it? It's better than
apparently it
Vancouver.
is. Has a
Yeah.
sun, has a little sun. Um, So, there's little tricks like sit in front of an open window, open
Mm-hmm.
the window next to your bed, because the beauty of quantum is that particles are also waves. So those little quanta of sunlight that are coming in through your window are also waves, and they can bend around corners, and they can enter your body and be used by you even if you're not sitting directly in front of the window.
Wow. Okay.
It's
That's
it's
it.
mind bending. Yeah.
And that is mind bending. Yeah. It reminds me of just like water will just fill up the space as best as it
Yeah.
can.
It's like
So
that.
yeah, it's quantum. So I think we have
Mhm.
one last tip to talk about.
Sleep. Oh my
Sleep.
gosh.
It's not a small one, I know, but
It's a
I
huge
know
one.
it's something
What
you've
could
studied
I
extensively.
I have? So what could be, if I had to give one tip, and as you know, Madeline, I give like 2-hour long talks on
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Um, I would say try to arrange your sleep so that it's as little disrupted as possible. And I'll explain what I mean by that. So, say I normally sleep, I have an Aura ring. It's not on my finger right now because it's recharging, but it tells me more or less how many hours I sleep every night.
Okay.
And for me, I'm at about 6.5. Of course, I would love if it was over 7 because that's kind of the magic number in research for optimal health, but I'm moving hopefully slowly towards that. So, say just for the sake of argument, I know from my whatever data, even if it's self-observation, I can sleep 6.5 hours. But say I'm very tired, fatigued, and sleepy early in the evening. And I think to myself, you know what? If I just went to bed earlier, maybe I would get more sleep.
Mm.
Okay, that's a big error. Most people, like, that's intuitive. I've totally done it myself. It never works. I tried it just a
Oh,
few nights ago. Does not
yeah.
work. Because here's what happens. I went to bed about an hour early, and my sleep was more disrupted that night than usual. And I know that because I
Yes.
can look at my tracker data. So a better strategy is to let yourself be in bed only for that amount of time that you know your body has currently the capacity to sleep. So say 6.5 hours, plus you add half an hour, because of course you don't fall asleep the minute your head hits the pillow and you don't and sometimes you might have to get up to pee in the middle of the night. So you have to give yourself a little bit of wiggle room there. So
Mm-hmm.
for someone like me who's sleeping more or less 6.5 hours, I would restrict my time in bed to 7 hours. Then I have to decide, well, which 7 hours do I want that to be? And
Mm-hmm.
I used to choose, I've choose differently now. So I used to choose to be in bed during the time when I felt like I was getting the deepest sleep. And for me, that was the morning hours, like from 7 till 10. So I would sleep in every day. I only ever worked in the afternoons, for decades. And then I would go to bed super early, toss and turn, be up and down all night, and just repeat that cycle over and over. Now I set my alarm for 6:20. Where I am in the world right now is North Carolina, and the sunrise is around 7. So dawn is around 6:20, right? The sky starts getting light, so I'm up.
Mm-hmm.
And that means I don't have to use artificial lights in my van when I wake up. And then by 7 o'clock, I have gotten dressed and out of the van and I go for a walk with my glasses off
Mm-hmm.
to get those morning 10, 15, 20 minutes of sunlight into my eyes to set my circadian clock for the day.
Oh,
That means I don't let myself fall asleep before 11 o'clock, even if
okay.
tired, because every time I do it, it's so tempting. Like I said,
Yeah.
I just fell
Oh,
for it just a few nights ago, and my sleep was the most disrupted it's been in probably weeks to months. So it's
okay.
figure out how much your body, you might have goals to improve in the future, right? So this isn't about giving up hope for improvement, but it's
Mm-hmm.
at where you're at right now and saying, I'm sleeping 6.5 hours. I'm going to give myself a 7 hour window. If one night I sleep really poorly and I'm up and down and I don't get anywhere near that, then I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to be very sleepy. My sleep drive the next day is going to be much higher. I'm going to still stay up till 11 o'clock, no matter what. And that
Okay.
additional sleep drive is going to give me a really solid consolidated sleep. So that's a way of using neuroplasticity. Like now, like this morning, I woke up at 6:17. Right? My alarm goes off at 6:20. I've been
Just
doing this
naturally.
now for
Yeah.
6 months, I don't know, 7, 8 months, and my brain is now trained.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I found that too myself. But I'm curious, like when you want to stay up to 11 o'clock at night and you're in a van
I
and
know. And it's
um
dark, it's pitch black.
and it's dark,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming that you don't want to be on a screen in the evening, which I'm sure happens sometimes
So
to the best of us.
I have these little let me
Oh,
just I'm not sure if you can
okay.
see them. So,
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm a geek, so I buy stuff and try it out. So this is physicist approved orange and red plastic that you can cut into shapes. And I have LED lighting in my van, which is far from ideal. But at the time I got my van, uh, it was made like I didn't know all this stuff that I know now. That was
Yeah,
just 2 years ago. Like I'm constantly learning. So I bought this plastic and I don't have it over the lights now because I wanted you to actually see me in
yeah, yeah.
blue light. But as soon as we're finished, I'm gonna cover all my little lights with this orange and
Oh,
red. So it's
okay.
kind of like wearing the orange glasses.
I see.
So I have my lights, so that way I can have my lights on in the evening to cook dinner and, do whatever. And then if I'm actually on a screen, which of course I am, because I'm just as addicted to, I work a lot, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Long
yeah.
evenings down here. The sun goes
Online.
down at 5, yeah. So I work and I have these guys on and I have my orange blue blockers on.
On
And I
your eyes.
also and I also have a program on my laptop called Flux.
Okay.
Flux, which automatically moves the light more towards yellow at sunset. It
Yes,
knows
I've
where I
heard about
am,
this.
and as
Okay.
soon as it's sunset, it changes. And then on my phone, which yes, I do have a phone and I use it a lot, I have a program called Twilight, and it makes the background of my phone much more red and much less blue.
All the time, or
Yeah, I mean, you can change it however you want
okay.
there with the settings, but I just keep it pretty much red all the time.
Okay.
It's
Those
not
are
obnoxious,
really,
it's just really calmer. Like I
yeah, yeah.
find now, like right now I have all my little plastic things off the lights and it's very intense. I really
Mm.
like the redder wavelengths of light. I find it much more calming.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And those are very practical tools that we can use right now that I'm going to be telling my kids.
So this, I bought them there. It was like $20 for a big sheet that'll
Okay.
last me for years.
And is there a name for that or just
You know what? I'd have to look it up for you.
okay.
I
Maybe if
don't
I
I
can
don't
get some
have
of
it
these
off the top
things
of my
and
head. Yeah,
sure, I can just leave the links at the bottom for people if they want to look them
sure.
up because it's kind of a no-brainer just to do these things and start getting a better quality sleep because I am guilty as charged to think, oh, I'll catch up tonight because I'll go to bed earlier. I just did that the other night. I went to bed really early. I thought, oh, I'm going to be so energized the next day, and it doesn't always work out that way.
I know.
So, and I do like to get up very early before the sun rises,
Mm.
but I have to turn on the light. So,
It's
unless I
very
want,
new for me. So what the quantum biology experts say is if you get up earlier, say you live in Canada and at some point, the sun doesn't get up till 8 or 8:30 or 9, 10, depending where you live, get yourself a pair of blue blockers and wear them until sunrise, then go
mm,
out at sunrise to get that full spectrum light
yeah,
on your retinas to set your
yeah,
circadian clock for the day. And then after sunrise, put those blue blockers back on.
okay, start doing that. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, so much. This has been like jam packed with, entry points for people into taking charge of, their routine, their lifestyle, their environment to start, turning the dial more towards health in their
Mm.
body. And I love the rabbit holes that you go down and then bring to us about the latest in these things that we can start to use to turn down the dial of pain, turn down the dial of anxiety, all of those things that we have more influence than we think we do, you know.
That's one of my mantras as well. Yeah, I
Mm,
couldn't agree more. Is a
mm-hmm,
lot of stuff we can do, even if we're quite severely ill.
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, Ellie, thank you so much for being here today and giving us those 5 tips to deal with or to break free from chronic disease. And for where do people get a hold of you? What have you got on offer right now?
Sure. So my website, I won't maybe read it out. I'm sure you're going to put a
We'll
link
list
to it
it.
at the bottom.
Yeah. Mhm.
Whoa. Yeah. Van life. Um, so I have a website, eleanorsteinmd.ca, and I would say I offer a ton of free stuff. So I have a newsletter that alerts people to upcoming events. I have a blog every month. I have a free video page with lots of full-length videos, like conversations like this, for example, on topics of sleep and how to use wearable trackers, and lots on neuroplasticity. And then I have 2 foundational courses. One is all about self-management. So if the kind of strategies that you heard today are of interest and you want to learn more and go in more depth, that would be my Pathways to Improvement course. And,
Okay.
and then I have a full course on neuroplasticity, and it's called Healing Through Neuroplasticity. And it goes into a lot of depth with literally dozens of strategies so that hopefully every person can find some strategies that are a good fit for them because we're all different.
Mm-hmm.
And then the thing I'm perhaps, I won't say the most excited, but I'm also excited about is I offer a membership. It's called Live with Dr. Stein. And I meet with my community members live on Zoom every other Thursday. I'm teaching them right now about quantum biology. So literally as fast as I'm learning and digesting the new information, I'm sharing it with them because I feel like it's has so much potential to really transform
Yeah.
lives.
Yeah.
And I do
That's
expert webinars,
yeah.
and you are actually going to be my January guest, and it's
I
going to
am.
be tell us what it's going to be about.
Well, you know how we go down these deep dives.
Yeah.
Lately, it sounds like something that I've talked about before in the past, but I'm talking about in a new way, and that is boundaries.
Mm,
Boundaries just shift everything, and even what you're talking about right now requires some inner boundaries to say,
yeah.
nope, we're not going to sleep in today because this is what I've promised myself to do. So, inner and outer boundaries and how that affects our health and how we can start reclaiming our lives through our own personal boundaries. So, that's what I'm excited about right now. And we're going to be talking about in January as it relates to chronic disease and chronic pain. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm really
I'm
looking
excited
forward to
about that.
that because
Yeah.
I'm giving kind of the strategies themselves, but they live within this bigger context of our beliefs, right? Our mindset and boundaries are
Yes.
such a big part of that.
They sure are. They sure are. And our beliefs about our own deservedness and
Mhm.
worthiness and really taking care of ourselves, which, yeah, through trial and error seems to be the only way. So, yeah, for the listeners, I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I have. And to get online with Dr. Stein's membership sounds like a wonderful place to be able to ask those questions and get the info as it's coming hot off the press. So, thank you so much for being here. We'll leave the links below, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Great. Thanks so much.